Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.
Detroit is Different, back in full effect. You know how we deliver things here. A special guest today, somebody that supported what we do at a lot of studio, more so with an initiative and giving me some game on like, hey, connect to this, connect to this, connect to this, connect to this. So Regional Chamber, and as he just said, the man that's gone to 500 plus bars, restaurants in and around Detroit, which is like, wow, it's that many. Some of them aren't here anymore. Some of them are coming back. But Devon O'Reilly, how are you today?
Great to be here, Kari. Appreciate the intro. The list will forever be growing, but we've lost some. We'll talk about it, but I'm always looking for new places to check out. You know, any type of restaurant, small business, cafe, that's what I'm all about. It's one of those things where I do it professionally because if someone said, you know, don't worry about money anymore, you can do whatever you want. You know what I would do? I would go to restaurants and cafes and bars, and I'd hang out and I'd talk to business owners and I'd find out their stories. So it's one of those passion things where I love to do it and I get to do it for work as well.
So it's like an Anthony Bourdain, but of the D. Rest in peace, Anthony Bourdain. Laid a hell of a legacy with that work, but also friends with our podcast friends. We think of Daily Detroit. Jeremiah has really been instrumental in so much. I should have got him on here. I already know he's gonna be text messaging me like, you got the team on before me. You're coming on soon too, sir.
Yeah, we're getting Jer. Shout out to Jer and Daily Detroit. I do a lot of stuff for them. The Friday episodes, I'm often on there talking about the places I've been, what's up in not only bars and restaurants in Detroit, but what's up in development, what's up in kind of goings on in the city. A lot of the political stuff, the economic development stuff. We get into that on Daily Detroit, and again, that's my wheelhouse. That's what I love to talk about and love to learn about.
So one of the things that connected us was we and Detroit is Different with our A Lot of Studio project. We were award recipients. It's a real cool grant, the NeighborHUB Grant, and that was our for-profit Detroit is Different. So it's a for-profit grant that comes out right now. The time is over for now, but guess what? Next year, you will get the opportunity, and I believe as this project grows, it's going to be more awardees, it's going to be bigger opportunities, but you want to connect to this, whether you're nonprofit or you're for-profit. Just this granting opportunity, the NeighborHUB Grant, we were a part of it, along with a lot of other projects. It connected us in many different ways, just many of the business owners, organizational leaders, and vision to be like, hey, get out here, get some equipment, and get going with what you want to do. But as much as that's something big, the chamber, development, small business, so much to talk about. Let's start with your Detroit story. What connects you to the city in the first place?
Okay, I'd love to start there. Start at the beginning. That's how I always start my podcast with people. Start at the beginning. So I was born in Detroit, Sinai Grace Hospital. Wow. Shout out to Sinai Grace.
There we go.
Grew up at various parts in Dearborn, actually, very close for a while. For much of my growing up life, I lived right on Tireman and Hartwell, which is like right near in the aviation sub. So literally kind of a few blocks from kind of the Dearborn-Detroit border. That's important because it was a very diverse upbringing, a lot of different cultures. I mean, not only do you have black and white, but you had, the Middle Eastern culture was really growing in Dearborn at the time. So, I just kind of grew up having friends from kind of all over the place, really. And then we moved over to the west side of Dearborn, off of Michigan Avenue area near Greenfield Village in that area. And then
Did you go to Fortson?
I didn't go to Fortson. You know what? It's funny. We moved right around the time I was going to high school. I went to Henry Ford Academy, which is the school inside of Greenfield Village. There's a school inside the museum in Greenfield Village. So I went to school there. It's a charter school.
Okay, so that already is so many questions just going to school. It's
Crazy.
Like, wow, you know what I'm saying? There go the President Carr. And I'm having lunch hour. You know what I'm saying?
It was wild because not only that, they basically deputize you to be able to share information. So if someone stops you and is like, oh, you got a badge in the blue polo, you go to school here, can you tell me where this is? Or can you tell me more about, the Lincoln chair? You got to know about that stuff. So like you basically become like a mini curator of the museum because you're supposed to represent the museum. So it was really interesting. And we had classes in the museum, and then we had classes like as a campus, like down by like the riverboats and stuff. So it was pretty wild going to school there. And it was a charter school. So it's a total lottery. It wasn't merit-based. It was just totally lottery charter school. So again, we had people going there from all over the Metro Detroit area.
Okay, and also just the culture of that for a lot of people that haven't been there. Like, you'd be surprised how, you live in a city and you don't go to the Motown Museum or the Henry Ford Museum. It's like you don't even think about this till somebody from out of town comes and is like, oh, can we go to some museums? And you'd be like, damn, I'll never go to museums here. But the Henry Ford Museum is it's a rich piece of American history. Definitely, if you're interested in cars and so many things, like they have like the idea of what they thought a house would look like in the 21st century.
Dymaxion house.
Yeah, it's like all types of stuff. I think probably like we're around the same age. So the Rosa Parks exhibit probably came into the installation there while you were attending. It's a lot of rich history in that exhibit, and it's a very big museum. It's one of those museums that you really could spend hours just going through, reading, interacting, and it's interactive too. Like you can touch stuff, but
people spend days there.
Yeah, it's easy to. And so for that, as Detroiters, check that museum out because it's here, and go to the Motown Museum when it opens, and the DIA. It's some rich pieces in and around and collections that you'd be surprised to fall upon. My favorite museum is Dobble's Museum, which the African V Museum is on. So it's at the intersection of Dexter, Grand River, and my mind, like kind of like Dexter, Grand River, 96.
Okay.
Like right in that intersection, sort of like that three-way intersection. Yeah. And I thought it was just like a collection of things, but when Dobble curates it, he actually brings it to life, and it's unique. It's like it's a story of how, I guess, steel, plastics, water, and these elements all come together. Like, you have to go on it with him. Because now you're going to be like, okay, this stuff kind of looks cool and Heidelbergish, but what's going on here? And he will tell the whole story.
Wow. So, that to the point I'm kind of getting to is there is so much interesting stuff around here. And so I saw that, in high school and whatnot. And going into college, there was a lot of people who were going away to school. A lot of people were sticking around. Some people weren't going to college at all. So I ended up sticking around, and I went to U of M Dearborn.
Okay.
I just felt like, I liked where I was at. And I know, it would have been interesting to go away somewhere far away, but I really liked what was going on where I was at, and I wanted to kind of dig into that. So I went to U of M Dearborn for college, and I studied business and marketing. I wanted to go into sports marketing. I thought I was going to be like the vice president of marketing, or maybe the general manager for like the Pistons or the Lakers one day or something like that, because I was huge into basketball. So I thought I was going to be like in sports. And I remember one day I was talking to somebody in the school, and they're like, clearly you have a passion for this and you like sports, but let me tell you something. The marketing director of University of Michigan or of the Detroit Pistons, they still had to go to the same school and learn the same things as the marketing director for Budweiser or McDonald's. Don't focus just on sports. Think about, the whole industry as a whole and what you can do there and where your interests are. And so I kind of moved out of the sports side of things and said, hey, sports is still fun, but I could open my horizons up and I could do anything. So it kind of got me out of just the sports track, although I did have some fun internships at the Lions and with the Pistons back in the day when I was in college. Those were fun.
Oh, yeah. Marketing the Detroit Lions is definitely a very interactive job. I can only imagine, selling those ticket packages of like, hey, you want to come to see the other team? I'm just
well, I don't want to. I don't want to date myself, but I will. But let's just say Joey Harrington was the quarterback, so it wasn't
Joey days.
It was lean times. Man.
Yeah. And it's interesting just the way pop culture intersects and does impact, like, my I guess formal education is in marketing too from Walsh. So, you learn these different things and how they intersect: marketing, publicity, public relations, advertising, and
And that's all. And
you
once you
know.
learn those, once you have that, it's all the same. And that's
Mhm.
what I wasn't getting at first. It was like, oh, I got to do this specific. What do I need to learn to be the sports director? And it's like, no. You can't think like that.
Mhm.
What do you need to be? What tools do you need? What foundational knowledge do you need to be? Again, a business leader, someone who has a lot of knowledge in business and creating a business and operating a business and selling and marketing, and you have some of that naturally. You do. So you have some of that naturally, and then it's about developing that. And then you could go be the marketing director for Pepsi, or you can be the marketing director for the Red Wings. It doesn't really matter because you have that foundational knowledge and you have those skills. You have that toolbox. So that's where I needed to break out a little bit and kind of open my horizons.
Which leads me to it's sexy because between it's us, it's the marketing people that come up with a lot of this jargon that usually confuses people, and it's repackaging the same stuff because at the root of it, it's now I like that more people are leaning into it's storytelling. But it's all storytelling. But it's how you package it and how people receive it. And then any good storyteller also knows, like, who's our audience and then what responses. How will it touch, hearts and minds and everything like that. So with that, one of the most unique stories that has shifted, and it's definitely very especially in the Detroit is different airwaves and everything. Like it's challenging because like it falls along the lines of race, opportunity, but this narrative changing of Detroit. Because Detroit's narrative in our lifetime, really like when we think like really 2000 on, has taken on such a metamorphosis of what is here and how it's here, and even just the ingenuity of the people that are here and how that interfaces. So then, you open up travel magazines and it's like Detroit's a top tier destination to go to. And then it's like content that like you or I'll make and it's like, oh, check this out, check that out. But it's more to the story. What do you think is to you, just as a marketing person, not the political side, what are some of the things that you think started really shifting some of the Detroit narrative to the world, well, nationally first and then to the world?
This is a conversation I love to have and a topic because there's so many nuances to kind of this revitalization of Detroit. And even, no matter who when you say that to somebody, that means different things to different people.
Yes.
And some people would say there isn't a revitalization. Some people say there is. I think no doubt things have changed. We can say that since 2000. I think that a few things happened. And I'll try and be as concise as possible on this because obviously there's a lot that happened. But we pulled the Super Bowl in, we pulled the baseball All-Star game, we pulled some events in, some major events to come here. And I always tell people we really weren't ready. If you think about like 2006 and the Super Bowl, I always think like, oh my gosh, people came here in 2006 to downtown and they thought this was like Detroit is back to this this iconic city and everything. You're like, man. 2006 seems like forever ago. We were still bored. We were still putting fake building wraps to pretend like there were businesses downtown when it was all still vacant.
Yeah.
Like we were not ready for that stuff. But at least it got people thinking about Detroit. And then what happened is you had private investment come in. You had some cool places open up, and I say cool with quotation marks if you're not seeing this, because that's all relative. And I think it became a sense where if a few. You get Slows. Slows is a great example.
Yep.
Slows Barbecue opens, and it's a place. It's a destination. Corktown is still gritty at that point. There's still not a lot of development happening there, but you get Slows, and they make really good barbecue, and people start coming there. And people start coming there, it becomes a destination. And then a bar opens up, and then a coffee shop opens up, and slowly kind of Corktown becomes more developed. With small businesses and people coming there. And I think, Corktown probably was really the original kind of area that developed, and it got eyes on people, got people's eyes on Detroit as far as like the little engine that could. You had some of these entrepreneurial spaces. Techtown opened up. You had Pony Ride back in the day where, Phil Cooley had all these, entrepreneurs and makers come to this one space, and you could see that. And so the narrative started being like, Detroit is this really gritty place where it's still really cheap to live. It's still, there's still ruins. People talk about like the ruin porn. People would come look at all, traipse around through the vacant buildings. And so it did become this, I don't know, Kari, I don't know how to say it. It's like it was coming back, but like it still wasn't for most people. You know what I mean? And it took, and this is where it gets into a very nuanced conversation. It took that
of the people that were here,
who was doing this,
and then
white people with money
access,
were opening up places because the white people with money had the ability to just point to a building and say, "I want to buy that," and put a cool restaurant in there.
Yep.
And there is something to be said where that's a positive. Because it does spur some economic development. Maybe it spurs some jobs. Maybe it spurs some more people to start thinking about this area. But at the same time, it doesn't. The same opportunities aren't available yet for Detroiters. We're talking like in mid 2000s. The same opportunities are not at all available to Detroiters who have lived here and who say, "Yeah, I'd love to buy this building that's vacant on Livernois, but how the heck am I going to buy it? I don't have any financing. There's no banks. There's no banks within a mile of me to go get to financing." So there still was a very kind of have and have not situation where the development that was able to happen in the mid 2000s was only really able to happen by certain classes or races, depending on how you look at it, of people. But it did do something. It did start to pull some people down. Then you had CompuWare open up. You had Dan Gilbert bring, whatever you want to say about him, Dan Gilbert bringing Quicken headquarters downtown was an absolute, spark, a match in the fire to get things started. And that brought people working downtown. And once you had thousands of people working downtown, that was the nucleus. Then you needed restaurants, you needed places for them to go, for them to stop after work and before work and all that. So that kind of really was the big bang of the downtown development. It really was Quicken coming downtown because after all, it's jobs. When you bring jobs downtown, when people have to work downtown, work in an area, you're going to spur economic development. So that's kind of the short version. And then, it kind of all grew from there. But we're still having this conversation.
Access, the equal opportunity, because the nuances, as people would say, it's like Dan Gilbert and some of the other more lucrative, and not necessarily people, but more so business and entities. You mentioned CompuWare, Peter Carmanos. They were given access to deals that a lot of people that have been here, the Don Bardens, the Herb Strathers, like the black business, I guess we would say, like elites, I guess that it's like, hey, I was never given this Marvin Beatty. It's like I never was given these opportunities. You know what I'm saying? So arguments definitely made, especially along race, because race is such a big elephant in the room of everything Detroit based and centered. But even through all of this comes, other, it's the opportunity cost. As one choice is made, other choices are foregone. But then even from those foregone choices, it creates other synergies around what could happen. Because Phil Cooley, and you mentioned Slows, like Phil, I consider, I've worked with Phil before. Phil has supported Detroit is Different, early on in the origination of Detroit. He was one of the first Detroit is Different guests. You know what I'm saying? So it's a unique lens of how to look at this, and you're right, right and wrong, it becomes tough, and then depending upon your vantage point and your biases, it's tough because but I do think that there are some competitive advantages depending upon where you're working out of and how you look at things, but it's very tough to just completely look at certain projects and say, I want to be in those shoes because the background of those shoes takes, do you have the capacity to do that?
Right, exactly. And in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, we started throwing around the word gentrification a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I think people use it now without even really thinking about what it actually means. They use it as kind of a catch-all term. And I, have a lot of conversations about this as far as it's used as a 4-letter word oftentimes. But at the end of the day, we have to think about what it really means. And that's that property values are rising, tax base is rising. There are positives to what gentrification can do. And people don't like the word. When you say it, it sounds like it's a bad thing. But there are positives to what happens there. But most people would tell you, and I've talked with economic developers, urbanists from around the country, Detroit is still not experiencing true gentrification. Not like you've seen in Austin,
not like
Brooklyn,
a Harlem and certain other places.
True, even Miami.
Yeah, because it's the displacement of the people that were there, because that's really what it becomes. It's like, it becomes like, what's that term? Urban pioneer, as if nobody ever lived here, and like it's just like some free landscape to just do whatever you want to do. And it's like, okay, that negates the fact of the people that live in East Pole Town, that live in Brightmoor, that live in these communities that they'll look at, due to a lot of other reasons. And then that's the other like elephant in the room when we think of Quicken Loans, is that Quicken Loans played a big party in the collapse of the home crises in 2008, with a lot of the subprime mortgages, and were bailed out, whereas a lot of owners, and not just in Detroit, the whole region. So we're looking at like even Detroit, Dearborn, Warren. This was just due to the automotive industry. It was so many homeowners in this Southeast Michigan region. When you look at the 90s and the 2000s, it was just so commonplace. That immediately shifts as a lot of people were refinancing and lost their homes. As what do they say? Hawking their house, what I'm saying? Taking money off their house and ending up in a predatory loan and
just walk away then. You just
walk away. So, you now end up with these desolate spaces throughout Southeast Michigan, where it's like, oh, we can do whatever. But the what got us here, and there's many places in Florida that were like this too. We can't shake out of.
So this is where I'm kind of turn this to a question to you and kind of your opinion on it. So what I think we are experiencing, or we are seeing, is kind of a sort of a micro gentrification. Whereas, if you talk to somebody and you say gentrification means that a place becomes unaffordable and pushes people out to live there. That's not happening in Detroit because there is still tons and tons of affordable homes, affordable neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. What is happening is certain areas of Detroit, particularly downtown, Midtown, Corktown, even Palmer Woods and Detroit Golf Club, those are becoming very expensive. I would argue, though, in the case of a downtown, downtowns are supposed to be expensive. Any downtown in the world, even in America, it's more expensive to live downtown. If you want to live in downtown Chicago, downtown Minneapolis, downtown Boston, it's expensive. And so there's an argument to be made that, it should be expensive to live downtown or in like these really desirable neighborhoods. And so that's kind of a trend everywhere. The question is, so there's a lot of affordable housing still available in Detroit, but like you said, there's large swaths of the city that have been, blighted, people walking away from houses.
My neighborhood. Like,
Decades.
you drive down my street right now, and it's weird because we go back and forth with the house on my corner. So, like, people come, this is in a house, the studio, because a lot of people are always like, damn, is studios here? But the house on my corner right now, it's a house on my corner where it keeps being broken into and scrapped for different resources. Even though we've paid to like lock it, it's like different ways of like trying to figure out how to lock from the inside. But people obviously, it's one of those weird things. It's like the contractor you pay to lock the house from the inside, usually sometimes it's the contractor that comes back and it's like, damn, they gotta, I'm gonna need some of these supplies. You know what I'm saying? So now you hit the corner, you come to Detroit, is different, and you're like, wow, what is going on over here? You can easily shoot, I guess, I don't know if most people saw it, but and I like horror movies, but the Barbarian horror movie that came out.
I heard about this.
And it's based in Brightmoor, and people are like, wow, is this real? Is this not? And it's like, okay, the premise and everything it's an interesting premise. And it's actually, as a horror fan, I think it adds a new arc into what will happen in horror genres in the future. But as a Detroiter, if you like horror, check it out. But it's interesting because Detroit does have there are still spaces, but they may not be the spaces that are quote unquote what's packaged as attractive. Being over here on Linwood and 12th Street, you have to be a visionary of knowing what you want to do, engaging with neighbors differently, and I'm sure, if I moved to Woodbridge, it would be similar, but a little bit different. You know what I'm saying? Because it's more attractive. It's more of a known place to move to and live and things like that. Like it's nuances of moving in communities like this. And yes, it's like, where do you want to be?
Right. And I think that's where, speaking frankly about it, you're right. Woodbridge is whatever you want to call it. I don't want to call it like a developing neighborhood, an up and coming neighborhood, but whatever the word is to describe that, it's getting investment.
Yeah.
New businesses are opening. People are going in. It goes back to the Corktown example. So, Kari, you sit in the unique seat for this. I'm kind of sitting in a broad perspective, looking at this from the city. You sit here in one of these places we're talking about. What do you think is the future? I mean, you don't want to leave. You have roots here.
Yeah.
You could, like you just said, you could go move and find a really nice house in the Livernois area over there, or golf club. Like, you could find one of these neighborhoods. Woodbridge, like you said, you could find one of these places and be like, no, I'm just going to start Detroit as different and move it over here. And it's cooler because there's a coffee shop next door and there's a bar over here. You could do that, but I don't think you want to do it.
No.
So what is the future then? Do you have to double down and say, I want to make this one of those neighborhoods, or do you do something totally different?
I think... And this is where, like, I guess another person may say, well, damn, you sounded like the person that's trying to change things. I think it's a give and take. Like, I have more autonomy over here. If I were doing some of the things that, like, I could only imagine, if I were downtown doing some of this stuff, even you coming for this interview, I'm probably having to have you check in with different people. I'm not going to have the same freedoms. So I'm getting less considerations in exchange for certain freedoms, which causes for me to have to engage in community a lot different. So I have to engage with my neighbors a little bit more. So it's like, if I know many people are coming, hey, park in my lot, because I'm one of the few people with the driveway. It's the west side, but it's a little east side I'm the one house with the driveway. So, we take advantage. So like my neighbors, depending upon the arc of when I do things, I have to be more responsive, engage with them, interact with them a little bit more. Whereas I think if I were in a different neighborhood, I would have like a neighborhood association that would speak whatever the rules are a whole lot more. So I could, like, instead of having the direct contact with my neighbor, like, hey, these people parking in front of my crib, I just got off work. The lady across the street, she works for, she's a manager for a, 911 dispatch. So she works interesting hours sometimes, and I understand it, so if I have guests that come to Detroit, it's different, and it's her parking space. I mean, technically it ain't her parking space because it's still a street, but it's her parking space. You know what I'm saying? It's front of our house. But that just happens to also be, if 3 guests come, that's a good parking space for one of my Detroit is different guests. So it's mindful of me to engage and have that relationship with my neighbor to be like, hey, check this out. We gotta... we have to work out something, park in my driveway and engage a lot more. Whereas I'm sure if I was in Woodbridge, where parking is very tough in Woodbridge, if you live in one of those homes, it's damn near, it's like New York sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, just you move, go to the store, you'd be like, I may want to walk 3 miles to go to the store because I don't want to lose my parking space. Now I may have to deal with the neighborhood association and get a citation, and then that citation becomes like, whoever I'm buying the land contract gets involved in it,
or the outdoor stuff you do.
Yes,
I mean, I think the outdoor stuff you do here. I mean,
most definitely,
it
would be very difficult to do that in like a university district or something like that, because it's a different class of quote unquote Detroiters. Whereas now, I think being in a community that's more grassroots, you have the advantage of actually engaging with your neighbors. Same thing with Daily Detroit, Jeremiah. Like, it's the same thing. Like, I was like, oh man, we over here in the North End. This is Dolores Bennett's stomping ground. So as he engages, he's doing more interaction with the people around him, because it's the onus becomes more on you. And if you're trying to be more exclusionary in an individual, I don't necessarily think that immediately moves to like people kicking in your door and stealing stuff, but it definitely, you lack the community love that I think you get from a community like this, that I would get if I were in a Palmer Woods, a Sherwood Forest, a Indian Village, or Grandmont Rosedale. And I'm not saying it's not love over there, but here it's completely different,
So that's a tough thing. So then I guess what I would kind of follow up with is, so how would you feel if money started coming into this neighborhood?
I would think kind of like a lot of people felt just period with Detroit, as long as it's inclusive, like nothing's wrong with development, but just don't exclude the people that are here. So as long as it's inclusive of what we do and it honors the culture and the tradition of what does exist here, because it may not look like nothing to you, but it's some stuff that goes on over here that we love, the Friends for Life celebration annually and things like that. So if you displace something like that, it impacts our quality of life. It impacts what we love about it. It makes things feel different to us. We want to keep these traditions going because it's a part of the ethos and the culture of here. You're coming to add what you add to the culture over here, not necessarily to look at what we got. Like, obviously, whatever they got don't matter at all. We just gonna reshape everything. We really want you to come here and be inclusive of what you have, and then also not necessarily our way. Like, it's very tough. Just this balance of being in America of like what is value and what is valuable, because Detroit in a whole can be challenged on that because what is valuable and what adds. And I do think social capital can play just as pivotal a role as hard cash can, but it's tough because in most people's minds hard cash is all that matters in America because we've been conditioned to do that. But then you get enough hard cash and then you turn around like a Phil Cooley. As last interaction I had with him, he's more so connecting with, he still obviously is involved in business, but more of it are involved in more intrinsic values that he's connecting to. And then here's another developer over there, and I definitely know Brian Malloy and what he does. Like, he's always been intrinsically connected. Like, that's been very purposeful in the work he does. That I think, it starts connecting because, that glass house, and you're so far away, you pay enough money to get away from what you quote unquote want to escape. And then you're there by yourself in this solitude and you're like, damn, really what I miss is connecting with the people.
Yeah.
And you connecting with people in my neighborhood all the time, even sometimes when you don't want to, you know what I'm saying? It's like, what you doing? You know what I'm saying? It's a guy over here that has some chickens and roosters, and it's like,
oh, wow.
I know that ain't zoned for over here. You know what I'm saying? So then a rooster gets loose, and it's like, all right, look, man, rooster gets loose too early. You know what I'm saying? Now that's waking me up differently, but it causes for a conversation.
Yeah. Putting my this is my last question on to you, but putting my small business economic development hat on. Is there a certain type of business that could really kind of be a catalyst for this neighborhood? Like, if I gave Kari $1 million and was like, you gotta take this $1 million and you gotta open a business in your neighborhood, and it can't be Detroit is different.
Yeah.
Like, is there something that would really spur, you think?
I think so much of it, and this is me. Shout out to Yusef Shakur and Tawana Honeycomb Petty. Like, I used to think it'd be like something, but so much of it is the like value. It could be any business. You know what I mean? We think of, one business where I like their story, and I know it's packaged back to marketing. I don't know the inside outs of it or whatever. But it was actually Sheila Cockrell that told me, and it hit me to more the gang of, what is it, Ziedelman's from Ann Arbor, but they also have stretched their footprint.
Zingerman's? The deli? Yeah.
Yes. So it's a deli. You know what I'm saying? So nobody would think a deli could possibly move to the way that it's moved and what it's become. But it's just from the perspective of a deli. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, nobody would think that, like, you know what I'm saying, making sandwiches would end up becoming a possible gateway to, like, community inclusive
event space. They do weddings and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, nobody's thinking that, you know, people, in the inception, but it's the values as time grows and things go on. And that's why I think it's more so the values of who's ever at the helm. So if they're like valued, great. But like, I mean, when I think of when I think of just the functionality of what would be empowering, what would be great, and it's great that they're in this footprint of solidarity and what they're doing with solar power and empowering more people with information of what that looks like. So that's like a functional thing. I think obviously when a neighborhood like this, different food options, as they always say, and I guess healthy is relative, but it is. There are many. There are way more places to get fried chicken in my neighborhood than there are to get a a kale salad. So like maybe let's balance that a little bit more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And other than food, I think spaces and places that it's a lot of other creatives like me. So I know I'm sounding. You said not Detroit is different, but not necessarily this model, but spaces where people can create, like creative labs to exist in this and maybe find some equity in that. Like really changing some of this Detroit is different business model to more of a business model and not necessarily like a, so much in social entrepreneurship and community, but really finding that balance and meeting people with their creative voice and turning that on. And I think Daily Detroit is looking to that too, but nobody's really like hit that. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's hit that nail on the head per se. And I really do think it's based on our passions and why we do it this way. But I do know it's a business in that because there's some very talented, creative people around here.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that, and I think it does come back to what you're talking about. It's not just one thing; it's a little bit of everything, and it's kind of allowing a space to be a blank canvas for the people that live there to kind of say what they want. And I know it's kind of a very corporate example, but I think of the Detroit Shipping Co., right?
Oh yeah, that's a cool spot.
It's like a little bit of everything. It's got spaces for food entrepreneurs to kind of test things out. I mean, that sounds like something that would be cool in terms of like allowing local chefs and local entrepreneurs to kind of share stuff out and kind of give people a taste of what they do outside of just their kitchen. It's got a little art gallery space. It's got a little pop-up stuff for retail. It's got a podcast studio for creators, content people. The event space. So that's the type of thing that's kind of like we were talking about. If every neighborhood had one of these kind of spaces where it was just a little bit of everything and it had some co-working, it had a co-working element to it, so people could come and work and take meetings. That seems to be like if you and I were to sit down and kind of draw up what is this space, I think we're on the same page as far as that type of space is what every neighborhood needs as kind of that catalyst, and then it grows out from there. If one of these food entrepreneurs gets really good, like your Maxwell Hardy or your Coop, then you get your own brick and mortar, and then you get your own restaurant. Or if you're one of these cafes that does like really good coffee or really good baked goods, you get your own brick and mortar. Or you're a co-working space, but you now become your own studio. Like to me, that's if I was designing how that works, that's how I think it can happen. Is you start small, you just mash everybody up in the same place, and this goes back to kind of the idea of NeighborHUB. You get a place where everyone's just gathering, sharing ideas, sharing food, sharing drinks, talking about stuff, and then from there, everyone gets to try a little bit of everyone's proverbial plate. And then if you become successful, success means going out and doing it on your own, and now you have 4 restaurants that opened up because of this, and 2 co-working spaces, and a bar and a cafe, and you basically, it's kind of like planting the seeds, and the pot and the soil and the seeds are that space we're talking about, this hub where it's co-working, food.
That's powerful, which makes me flip as we get closer to a close on this. The question I have for you in that case would be, because this is where what we do really kind of comes into play too, in marketing and perspective and I call it propaganda sometimes because it is that. But then at that point, will every business be racing to like look at the same goal as success? Like how much have we been ingrained in this American model of success? And maybe not even the owner, but sometimes like it's the team around you to like, is success always franchising? And like, is your goal always to go from, Chick-fil-A 10 years ago to Chick-fil-A now? Or can success be staying, here's another Dearborn spot, and I thought they were closing. I think they're staying open. Miller's. Can you be Miller's? Can you stay in that space? Because I'm sure over the years, as much if people's been there, like it's known for its burgers and stuff like that, because they season the beef in a different way and they pick the beef different way. So if you get a burger from there, if you like burgers, check it out if you happen to be on that side of Michigan
and bring
Ave.
cash.
Yeah, well, yeah, that too. Yes, have cash as well. It's real old school. You know what I'm saying? So, how many people will choose the Chick-fil-A option over staying Miller? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because success still can be Miller's.
Yeah.
But you have to have the consciousness for that. So my question is, how do you have that in America where everything is pointing you towards franchising and,
Yeah, you got to have a vision. And so this is actually a very relevant question to me because I sit in both worlds where you talk about entrepreneurship and small business. And like if that was a Venn diagram, entrepreneurship and small business overlap like a Venn diagram, two circles. But they're just not on top of each other. They are separate. There's elements to small business that are very small business. There's elements to entrepreneurship that are entrepreneurship. And the example obviously would be the difference between what we call a startup company and a small business. And people are constantly confusing this. And I got to tell you, Kari, like I spend a lot of time talking to both people in both worlds, and I also spend a lot of time explaining to people the difference. When you're a startup, when you call yourself a startup, and I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a startup, you have several specific goals. You have to grow your business, sell your product, and scale and take investment. The goal is always scale up, scale up, scale up. Because once you start taking on investors, venture capital or other capital, you become an entrepreneur. This becomes a startup. You are beholden to those investors. You got to scale. You got to do it quick. You got to grow, and it's just grow, 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 and take on levels of investment. And eventually, hey, you either IPO or you get acquired. And that is the goal of every startup: is get acquired or IPO. There's not a single startup founder who's going to be successful who doesn't have that goal in their mind: IPO or acquisition, because that's how you're going to be successful. If you're a small business, like you said, that path is different. That's not going to be your path. The path may be franchising. That's maybe the ultimate goal for a small business owner. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just being successful and having a quality of life. And that goes back to the quality of life. So I think you have to sit down and say what your vision is. You really have to be honest with yourself, I think. And it takes a lot of self-reflection. Maybe it takes some meditation. Maybe you walk out into the woods somewhere and, have an epiphany. But it takes really digging down deep and saying, what is success? Is it me sitting in some mansion in Malibu and, having, $20 million because I IPO'd a startup company? If that's success, then you have to think about the type of business you're going to open. You're probably not going to open a burger spot and end up there.
Yeah.
But is success having a house on the Detroit Golf Club and being able to invite your friends over and swim in your pool and stay local and stay in Detroit and have a successful business that you really enjoy and you wake up every morning and you love going there and you employ people from the neighborhood and that's all good too, and you live a perfectly fine quality of life, but you don't have the dream isn't to make millions of dollars. The small business owner, I think, the true small business owner wants to be successful in so much as they are comfortable in their life, they love what they do, and they create opportunities for jobs for local people, and they they don't give back to the community, maybe not explicitly, but they give back to the community by being a presence and being an anchor in that neighborhood. So that's a small business to me when I think of what that is. And you have to be honest with yourself if you're going down this path. Where am I? If you find yourself being a small business owner who wants to, have a $10 million startup company, there's a disconnect there between your vision and what you're doing, and you're going to have to switch paths.
And I think that's also where the onus of us in media, and this is where marketing and media kind of, as you say, intersect, have to unpack it. And we have to look at success and see like a Janet from Source Booksellers. And I was told a long time ago from my grandfather, rest in peace, Don Scott, that when I evaluate the success of a business person, I don't just look at a person's money, actually. I look at how long you've been in business. Whatever business has been in business the longest, that to me is the most successful business. So it is the business that, Brazelton Flower Shop, that, you know what I'm saying, that is transitioned from father to son to now daughter in that transition. I look at that like that's success. I don't look at Elon Musk and say, well, he got all this money, so that's successful. And I'm not necessarily, saying that there's not success in that role of business either, but that also plays a role. And I think to me, that's how that cuts against some of the gentrification, because now it's just not an assumed idea that the minute that, I don't know who steps in, let's say, I don't know who like Warren Buffett's like, wow, I like Detroit, so I want to buy half the West Side and just start putting up stuff everywhere. We can't just capitulate to him because the marketing and the branding is he has a lot of money, so he's a great business person. We need to look at Janet with the Source Booksellers and say, well, Janet has embraced this community for decades. So that has a social capital that we can evaluate with a cost that equals Warren Buffett's wealth, which I know a lot of people would look at me and say I'm crazy for saying something like this, but that's how I think we really holistically connect in community and then find that intersect, because a lot of the entrepreneurs and small business owners still look at and kind of, I think, submit ourselves that this person is a better at business and this is the grand goal in business, when in reality, like you said, the quality of life may be better at quote unquote scaling back, as they would say, or just staying put and being where you're at.
Yeah, we talked about some of those people, and I mean, some of my favorites that I've had recently. You think of Godwin at Yum Village.
Oh, yeah.
Godwin is successful by any measure of that, and maybe he's happier than the startup entrepreneur tech person who's raising $40 million round, who has to like lose sleep and beholden to investors. I'd argue Godwin is probably much happier, and he wakes up every day a lot happier about what he does, even though he puts in long hours. He's a lot happier about what he does, and he is undeniably successful. And maybe for Godwin, success means just a second location or a catering, having a catering arm. Maybe that's success. And that would be everything. So it's, we think smaller, like Q from, Q's Kitchen. I'm thinking on Woodward. Yeah. She's, incredibly successful in her own way. And I think, that's just as successful as a multimillionaire entrepreneur.
And that's how we have to embrace this as a community too. We can't all just slowly say this person has more money, so they're more successful,
right.
Which I think in business is relative, because the tough thing about being that startup, chasing capital investment and venture capital and all that stuff, you lose, and this is one of my biggest critiques about sometimes those aggressive businesses, you lose care and concern about the end user in the long run, because you're more concerned about the investor than the end user.
Right.
And whereas a small business owner, I think you have an intimate relationship with the end user. You know what I'm saying? If these fries are bad, you're going to hear about the fries. If I have a restaurant like that, I'm less concerned about the fries being good, and I'm more concerned about this investor keeping their money in our stock. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, hey, find some cheaper fries so they can get a better margin on their return.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Hence, like, no offense to Chick-fil-A, but, obviously as they've expanded so much, they've had to outsource the resources they get, because exponentially that investment changes the product, whereas when you got one or two restaurants and then you move to thousands, which I think McDonald's really wrote a lot of that playbook, but it's gonna have an impact on the quality of what can be delivered.
Look, I mean, at the end of the day, Kari, I mean, we're of the same generation. Biggie said it in '96: "More money, more problems."
You got that right.
Seriously, I mean, no joke, because like you said, I think people glamorize the startup life, the startup grind of being, whatever it is, a tech, a high growth industry entrepreneur. Man, I talk to a lot of them. It's a tough life, man. It's really tough, especially when you start taking on money at the $5 million, $10 million, tens of $1 million level. Like you said, you no longer own your company anymore. It's really just about beholden to investors, shareholders. I have to do what they want. I lose, and you see these tech people, the Zuckerbergs, the whoever's. You think Elon Musk is the cream of the crop, and like he answers to no one. That's not true.
He
There's a
answers
board.
to so many people, and not only he's answering to the people that were investors from the beginning too. Like
Right.
it's not like a you get out of bed and all of that. It's not as much of an arm's length transaction as it is when you're that small business owner. I made you a sandwich. You like the sandwich. You're happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It's like this investment has goals down the line, because if it starts looking shaky, or I think that this is a better way the money should move, it changes the dynamics of everything.
Yeah.
I think so. I definitely agree.
I mean, think about the Apple. They threw Steve Jobs off. They kicked Steve Jobs out of the company back in the 90s because they're like, you know what? We don't care if you founded it. You're not making us money. You're out of here.
Yes.
Anyone can lose their. When you're a founder, people think Elon Musk doesn't have bosses. He's got bosses, and he can be fired.
And it's not the end user. That's the
right.
tough thing.
It's not just I love my Tesla, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because like that's the weird thing about it. As much as we honor as much as we honor the billionaire, even going back to like Howard Hughes, we still don't understand who they're beholden to.
Mm-hmm.
Because we still engage in business and think the end user is the most important person. So like if somebody in Tesla says, hey, guess what? We need to shift from electric to something different. If all signs point to that in the investment, guess what? You no longer care about who's buying that car. You gonna follow what the board says, because the board puts the money in this machine. We're and they're making you're on phone calls and all of this. Like it's not like you say,
it's not as
more
glamorous
pressure
as people think. It's really
more
not.
Pressure. And then you're also dealing with the egos of a person that writes you a check for like a venture capitalist. Like the person that. First off, just due to how our society is set up, the type of person that can write you a $10 million check has a $10 million check writing ego, too. So it's not like you could just say, hey, man, some things changed around. We just need a little bit more time. What you mean some things changed around? I want my lawyers to talk to your lawyers. I want my accountants to talk to your accountants. I want my PR people to talk to your PR people. I want my, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Where you like, God damn, you know what I'm saying? It's like, can you trust anything? No, I don't trust nothing because I gave you $10 million.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And furthermore, before you get this $10 million, we're going to track every asset that goes connected to this money. You know what I'm saying? Hence, it's like golden handcuffs sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So classic Detroit is different questions. Now we here. Very first car, year, make, and model.
Very first car was a 2003 gray Focus. You want to say it looked gray, but it was called Platinum, and that's why I wanted it.
Okay, that's what's up. Where was the first place you went when you got it?
Ooh, good question. Where did I go? I think I went to Open Gym at Joe Dumars Fieldhouse.
Oh man, the Joe D days.
Yeah,
those were some.
I went to Open Gym.
Those were some competitive. Those were some competitive basketball games.
It really was.
More,
I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend like
competitive basketball.
I wasn't running the court or anything, but like my friends were going up there. I was like, hey, I don't have to hitch a ride with my friends or my dad anymore. I can drive myself. So that was fun.
Yeah, if you could, let's put it like this. I was on a good run of a team. That's the thing. If you could hold court on Joe Dumars, I would say 4 games. That was solid.
Yeah. And then
4 games.
And then you wait 2 hours to get in the next round.
Yeah, exactly. You'd have to be phenomenal for them to be, because most people usually brought their own team.
Right.
You would have to be so much better than the other person that rode in the car with them to be like, you gonna sit this one out. We picking up my man.
Right.
All right, that's so Detroit right there. You went to Joe D on your first run.
I was a big basketball kid.
That's a cool spot to hit. Yeah, you are a hooper, hooping at heart. You're the DJ at the end of the fireworks. You get to play a song. Woodward Jefferson, what song you playing?
At the end of the fireworks. Oh man, I mentioned it. I mean, again, it's my age, but Mo Money, Mo Problems. That song got me into like hip hop. I remember going to Borders. I'm dropping some. I remember going to Borders on Ford Road in Dearborn, and that was like the first CD. And I think I had to get my mom to like buy it for me.
Probably.
And I had to convince her like, look, like Puff Daddy, like he doesn't seem very like, you can get this for me. So that was like the first single I got. I think was Mo Money, Mo Problems, and All About the Benjamins was the other side of this. the other track in the CD. I would have to play that because it got me into everything. I think there's a true message there, as much as like Glitz and Glam and Puffy was all about kind of we're building up this empire, Bad Boy Records empire. At the end of the day, it had a really important message. I think that after all of this, it still means more problems, more crap you're gonna have to deal with, even though you're becoming successful.
On that point, I tell people all the time, and then I know I'm speaking as if like, well, you have it, because definitely when you don't have money in America, it's going to impact your, or with less money, it's going to impact your quality of life immensely. But cash itself is a very fast depreciating asset. And then the more money you have, it really becomes an asset and tool for business. So like, it's like, okay, family money, and then it hits like a pivot where now it becomes like a business asset, but it's a fast appreciating asset. Networks, connections, resources, access to where you buy the best resources. All of this is so much more exponentially valuable than money, because the person with money is going to always hand that over. You know what I'm saying? When you are that restaurant owner and you've just opened up 15 locations in Chicago and you're like, wow, man, the fish here sucks. The people that you connect to. Now you need that person that knows where to buy the fish, how often it comes, the logistics of getting it traveled to you, all of that stuff, who can cook it, how to refrigerate it, how to set things up. Like now, as cash is a fast appreciating asset,
Absolutely.
So, we've definitely gone over some economic terms. So, if you, like in a lot of Detroiters' different interviews, take notes in this one, figure that out. Last one. If you could rename Woodward after one Detroiter, who would it be and why?
My favorite Detroit historical figure is Hazen Pingree. And he's already sitting on Woodward, so it'd be easy to rename it Pingree. Because Hazen Pingree, for those who don't know much about the history, was truly, they literally called him the man of the people. The man of the people. He was against kind of all big business, big banks, big finance. He wanted truly an equitable city that was kind of governed by the people. And he was an entrepreneur himself, shoe shop. He was a successful not shoe salesman, but he owned the shoe shop. So he's a successful entrepreneur in his own right. They called him Potato Patch Pingree because when times got rough, he wanted to invest in the city and help Detroiters grow their own food, grow their own potatoes. Times are hard. We can grow our own food. We can produce stuff here in Detroit. And so I just really appreciate kind of like his values. He was kind of a real founding father of the city. He tried to be the mayor and the governor at the same time, and they said, no, Hazen, you can't do that. So he went with the governor.
That is an entrepreneur.
He wanted to be both. So Hazen Pingree has always been someone kind of I've admired as kind of a man of the people for Detroit.
I like it. And that definitely is entrepreneurship. I'm always looking to color outside the lines. I'm always talking to my attorney. Shout out Stephanie Hammonds. Like, hey, make it happen. There got to be a way to. And it's like, well, no. And it's like, don't tell me what can't happen.
Can't is not.
Tell me how you can make it happen.
There you go.
So definitely, Peace be. Check this out. Great interview.
I was so good to talk to you, Kari. I love doing the long form podcasts and talking about all sorts of stuff. So much cool stuff going on in Detroit. Just get out there, explore. I always tell people, don't go to any chains. We just talked about it. If I could leave people with one message, it's try the place next door. If you're going to go to McDonald's, if you're going to go to, Popeyes, try the place next door that you don't know and give them a chance instead.
Yeah. It definitely helps the ecosystem a whole lot more.
Absolutely. Money stays in the community.
All right. Peace.
Detroit is Different is where you get information, artistry, history, music, and even comedy. Detroit is Different, a home for the culture of Detroit. Visit online at DetroitisDifferent.com today.